Welcome back, everybody, to our final studio visit for Makeready in this final weekend 3. We are super pleased to welcome Dan D Shafer from Cornish College of the Arts and the Book Arts program. Dan D Shafer is a graphic designer, artist, and educator living and working in Seattle. He owns Dan D Co, a graphic design studio specializing in book design, environmental design, and event branding and promotion. Clients include Kronos Quartet, American Cancer Society, Salish Lodge, Herman Miller, and Pratt Fine Arts Center. He is also the creative director at Shin Music Press, an instructor in the design department at Cornish College of the Arts. He is currently working to release a custom baseball scorebook. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to switch. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of audio testing and stuff for people. I'm going to switch my speaker to my computer. We'll see if this works. I do have a guest with me today who's Laura Bazad, who's one of my students from the fall. And one of the projects I'll be talking about is a collaborative project that she was a part of. So she's working in the background back there. But what I want to do to begin is, and everyone just like wave at me if my audio isn't working, but I assume it's good. The thing I want to do to start is just talk about Cornish. I have been teaching here at Cornish now for a terrifying long time. I've been here for 15 years. And when I graduated with my master's degree in San Francisco, I sent a resume over to Cornish and they were like, good timing. We just lost our book arts teacher. Do you want to teach some book arts? And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much my dream job. So I've been here ever since 2005, working with a variety of other teachers who have come and gone to build the studio up and kind of integrate it into the curriculum. And so I want to give you a background of what that looks like. And then I'm going to talk specifically about collaborative projects we do in our classes. It's a good example of a lot of the capabilities we have here. And it may be of interest to some people just how we get students to work together. There's a lot of individual projects that happen, but the collaborative projects are particularly interesting. And there are some good challenges that come with that. So here in the room, just a quick like facilities tour. When I showed up here, we had 4 Chandler and Price platen presses sitting by the windows and no other presses. So we've worked over the years to get some flatbed presses. We now have, I'll just kind of like roll around. We have a couple bigger flatbed presses now, a giant CNP and one called a Challenge. It's kind of a weird one. We've slowly gotten better paper cutters. We had a really terrifying one that was an old manual paper cutter, and we just a couple summers ago got a hydraulic one, so that's fun. We're upping our capabilities. We have this huge foil stamp machine that we got free from someone last summer that we don't even have voltage to run yet, but over the years we just continue to build up the equipment. It's getting a little more crowded in here than it has been. It'll never be as beautiful as the School of Visual Concepts letterpress studio was, but that's just because we let students in it and let them have the run of the place. We are part of the design department. All the book arts classes happen in the design department. And that's one of the interesting things about teaching book arts and letterpress at the college level is what department does it live in? And here at Cornish, philosophically, it lives in the design department. I think they thought, well, there's letters involved, so it must be design. But it is a good fit for our students. And this is the first stop on the tours of the college. And it's often, I think, the thing that gets students to come to Cornish, because they can come here and they're like, oh, I want to use that stuff. And so they every time I have people show up for class, they're so excited. That I've been waiting to get in this room since I signed up to go to Cornish. And we do have a great support system now in the labs. We have lab monitors and lab techs who are able to bring even first-year students in and run workshops with them. So before they get to take a full class in the lab, they do have access and get to use it. And all students across all disciplines, even though it's a design, all the classes are run through the design department, all students in all areas performing or visual arts can come into this lab and be assisted using it. So that's a nice opportunity. In addition, the door, let's see if I can point it back there, the door back that way is to the printmaking lab. So we have a full printmaking facility that's fine arts, and often there are design and fine arts classes running right at the same time. And so we see each other working side by side. The screen printing lab is back through the door there. So we're often using screen print, and while the printmaking students are as well for fine arts things. And so there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens, and that's really exciting. I think that's kind of the dream of coming to a school with so many different disciplines is to get to see other things happening. And even though bureaucratically it's very difficult for people in other majors to take classes, there's a lot of mix with just a lot of interaction with students doing that kind of work. So that's fun. We also have, you can't see it. Well, let's try one. I'll turn my computer around. The other thing is we have the best view from our letterpress of the Space Needle right there. And so you can, in our lab, work on a letterpress and be staring at the Space Needle and like, is there a more quintessential arts Seattle experience? I'm not quite sure that there is. It's pretty amazing. So what I wanted to talk about, I'll begin our talk today with a project that we worked on this fall. Book Arts typically runs once a year, and this year it was in the fall. And we were, like almost every college, we were working remotely. Cornish had a semi-open campus, so we could come and work with pretty strict guidelines here at school, but for the most part, my book arts class was run from a distance. I came to school to teach from this room, but I broadcast my classes, my bookbinding lessons over Zoom to my students. And that was a real challenge, setting up kits that would come by and pick up materials. And I had no idea how it was going to go. I've been teaching for so many years, just how to hand bookbind in the same room. And I was really unsure how it would go from over Zoom, but it was, surprisingly went pretty well. I was really happy with that. And so when it came time to try and do some actual printing, that's where I was really unclear how it would go. So I want to talk through the process we take. I've later on in this talk, I'll show a whole bunch of different forms that collaborative projects have taken with our students. And so there's always sort of an input, a different idea that starts it off. And this year, the input that I started the students with was Karita Kent, Sister Karita Kent, and this book, Damn Everything But the Circus. And Jamie or Tom, if you guys want to spotlight on my phone now too, so it's on there. I'm not sure if they're both turned on right now. But this book, one of the things about it is we had the font that Karita Kent used, the kind of playbill letterpress font. So here it was in the room, and then her book is this kind of typographic and visual exploration over the top of type an alphabet every time. And so it's this sort of circus type font. And we had it in letterpress. So I thought, well, let's just use this as our inspiration. So we all kind of looked at this book. I presented it to the students. And I said, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to respond to this typography? And what I gave them was the fact that we would do an alphabet book like Karita Kent, and that we would respond to it with some kind of imagery and potentially additional text. And so what the students came up with was the idea of using a random text generator to respond to their letters. So everyone chose a couple letters, and then on an internet random text generator, they would generate some text and see if they liked it. If they didn't like it, I told them, well, just go ahead and switch to what you have, and you can choose a different thing. So the content, what we started playing with was random text and then creating their own imagery based on that. And the reason for working with a few different types of visual information was to just get to have a way to use our sort of image making techniques. And for this one, it was going to be screen print, letterpress, and then on specific paper. So the process, even getting started with this, was a little challenging with the students, because what we ended up having to do, since we weren't all meeting in the classroom, is I had to get them, first of all, their letters and the size of the book, and determine all the physical characteristics of the book in a way they could work from. So one of the first things I had to do was print out all the text that they would eventually be printing on the letterpress at actual size. So I did a print of all the letters and scanned those at 100% in high resolution, and then provided them to the students I think I ended up live tracing it. So then it was an Illustrator file, a vector file that they could then place in their document and do all the rest of their design with. And so one of the nice side benefits of that is I ended up with nice digital scans of this text that I can use for other projects. I'm constantly using kind of analog text on my own personal and professional work. That text became the cover, and so I'll bring Laura on at this point, because this is the end product for the cover, which is screen printed onto some book cloth. We got a donation of this weird, if you look at the texture of this, it's like this old library grade book cloth. It's kind of plasticky, it's really stiff, but I love the color. It has this nice kind of like a orange and sort of neutral brown mixed in there. And I thought it worked really nicely with the complementary teal. And so those colors inspired the paper choices that we made. But to begin, we're going to be going back and forth because Laura's going to be working behind me, sort of working on this book as I talk. Do you want to bring over the pieces for the cover? So we have our cover material, and any of you who have ever made an accordion book will know it's one of the easiest formats for a collaborative book or for a book in general, because it's just got a front and a back cover, and then you glue your pages to it. And so what Laura's going to be doing is taking these cover boards, cutting this piece in half, and then just wrapping material around it. So we'll check in on the steps as it goes along, but this material will get cut in half, and then the covers will be put front and back. And so this alphabet here just becomes a nice texture for the cover of the book. The text here is screen printed onto the book cloth, and that's one of the, I think we have two primary ways of image making here that we use in book arts: screen printing and letterpress. Those are the two ways that we're often working, and the most accessible and most supported printing methods here in our lab. There's a whole bunch more that we'll show later, but those are the two main ones. Oh yeah, one of our favorite tools here. Laura, want to make sure you see our weighted bricks. That these were made a bunch of years ago, but they're all wrapped up with letterpress wrappers. So once that gets glued up, it'll get weighted under some brick. So having our content decided and providing scans of the letters, the students then went through a design process where they would come up with a phrase that they liked, and then make that phrase and some imagery interact with the letterpress text. And the basic limitation that I gave them was you'll be doing 2 print runs, one printing your letter, another one printing whatever you want else with silkscreen. And that can be imagery, it can be text, well, it'll be your other text, and then anything else you want to do. And so most students stuck to that. They did a run of letterpress and a run of silkscreen. The challenge this year, as you might imagine, being in a pandemic year, was they had to A, come into school, which most of them weren't doing very much, and B, do something that was a bit of a risk. None of them had done this, at least for a couple years. Maybe they dabbled in it in foundations year, but they were coming out to do something one time with kind of a lot of pressure and a little bit of support. We had our lab techs here, or sometimes they would be here when I was here. But it was quite a challenging thing to ask them to do. But everyone got really excited when they had a chance to do it and come in and print. So I'll show you some of the outcomes that the students ended up coming up with. So here on the phone camera, you can see this. They got to choose which order the printing happened in, so they could either do the letterpress first or the silkscreen first. Here you can see the letterpress was second because the yellow, there's a little bit of show through with that white silkscreen ink behind it. Sometimes it doesn't matter, or it's a little harder to tell. This one, I'm not sure if the letterpress or the screen print was first. And then some people designed things on the computer and then had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this with just one print run, or do I need a couple print runs? So this one, obviously there's black and there's blue along with the letterpress. So this was a couple of silkscreen runs instead of just one. Some people ended up doing some really innovative taping and masking to make multicolor print runs happen. And that was great because they thought, as they designed it on the computer, it was just going to be one print run, and they realized, oh wait, once I got here and started putting ink on paper, I need to make some adjustments. A few people were uncomfortable or had limitations within their households that didn't let them come in. And so some of the work was actually printed for the students. This project in particular, the student provided the information in the files, but then it was printed by either a lab tech or by myself. But people trying out split fountains. That's this all one silk screen, but it's fading from blue to this sort of pinky color over the top of the letterpress. You can see that. And it's again, the role of this studio in Cornish's curriculum, having our students just have to confront, what does ink do when it lays on paper? How does it interact with other inks and materials? Is so valuable. It forces them to think through the process instead of just thinking about a design as something that's existing in a digital space and then coming out flat on a white piece of paper. It's a really good exercise for them. So a lot of experimentation happening, a lot of good color choices. And then the students all had, I got 3 kinds of paper for them. They're all from French paper. There's this really cool orange with a weird, like sort of glossy finish to it, and then a blue and a tan. And these 3 I thought was a nice combination of colors. And so they could choose which background color they wanted to print on. In the end, each student, and we have a bit of a mess going on here, but in the end, each student printed 2 up. So they would print both letters at once. And then we kind of figured out how to use the sheet to work backwards economically. We were basically arrived at the size of our book from cutting down a sheet into an economical size. So there's very little waste. There's a little bit of waste that's going to happen around the edges when we trim, but the side over here would be the tab that will glue the accordion panels together on. And then each 2-panel section here just becomes the spread for each student's work. And so when you look at these are final trimmed pieces. 1 inch over here will be folded out of the way, and I'll do this roughly just by hand. So there's our tab to connect together, and then you would fold right in half the actual sheet. And if you do it right, that letter should fall right in the middle. And this is the module that Laura will get working on after the cover's done. And each one of these then just stack together and glue in one big accordion panel. So that's the project that we had the students do, and I'll show the final outcome here. Laura, where are you at? Do you have a cover glued or anything? You're still working on glue. Okay, cool. Laura's going to glue the first board to the cover material, and then I'll bring over and we'll give a little lesson on wrapping a board, just in case some of you haven't done that before. It's kind of fun to see how that works. But I'll show the final outcome. This is the collaborative book that we came up with in the end. There's a little bit of an introduction sheet, a cover page, and as you can see, this format is really nice because each student produces a spread and they all get attached together. So it's, as a collaborative project, it works really well because each student is kind of working on their own. They're not dependent. They're not printing on the same sheet of paper. Everyone has their own sheets of paper they're printing on. And as you can see from our press sheet, everyone's printing 2 press sheets at once. So it saves a little bit of time. You print your letterpress at once and then come back with silkscreen. The limitation then is you end up with the same color for your letterpress or your silkscreen, unless you get creative and do some split fountains or hand inking and ink up individual letters one at a time. But that meant that the printing could be relatively efficient and still come up with a lot of pages. And this is a pretty satisfying collaborative book, I would say, in my experience. Often it's difficult to get a book to come out feeling kind of substantial in a collaborative project. One of the things you'll notice on the title page, it says A to Z, almost, mostly, sort of. We had assigned all the letters to students, but not everyone got in to actually do their printing. And it was in a year with a pandemic, that was totally excused, that we couldn't force anyone to come in. So I don't think we quite get all the letters. And in the end, I chose to not even put mine together in order, to not highlight the fact that they weren't actually all the letters weren't included. Nice. Why don't you bring it over? So we'll show the cover in process now. So we're wrapping the board here. You can see the board is set, and one of the things, don't forget to cut the corners. So when we wrap a board, we'll cut corners off, and then we'll fold the pieces around. So this one has one edge wrapped around, and when you cut the corners, it prevents all extra bulk from happening when you wrap the other edges around. So I always tell the students, it's sort of like wrapping a very thin present. This is your box that you're wrapping around. So that's the collaborative project we did this fall. Are there any questions right now about that project before I move on? Because what I'll do next is start rolling through a whole bunch of other ones. Does anyone want to ask anything about the experience of working through a pandemic or any of the specifics about that project? Great. So I'm going to go through, let's get something on the screen here so you don't have to look at a blank. I'm going to go through a number of projects and just talk about designing collaborative projects for students to do together and some of the considerations that go into making those decisions. So the very beginning of teaching at Cornish, I came to Cornish from having done a little bit of letterpress and book arts at Western Washington University. I studied under Elsie Vostell Ellis and learned, it was basically 1/4 of book arts that I got in my undergrad education. And then while I lived in the Bay Area, there was a studio internship type thing they did at Mills College. So I worked in the book arts lab at Mills College as a volunteer, sort of a workshop instructor and lab monitor for a couple of years, and got some really good experience there as well. But that was mostly my influence in my book arts knowledge up to that point, and of course being just personally very interested. So coming in, I was kind of learning in front of my students for the first couple of years. Certainly, I had most things I was teaching I had done once or twice before, and so half the time we would make a book and it would sort of open, or we would, figure out what limitations materials had on the fly. And I think, that just is what it is. But still, as I look at some of these older things, and this was an early book I did. Would have been the second semester I was here at Cornish. This thing called documents, and everybody made a document. So they all came up with some concept for a document, printed it, and then we came up with a little pocket binding. The whole thing is a little wonky. It's like quite lopsided as it comes together. But there's cool ideas, and there's like people printing on fabric, and like some designs that are quite modern and really experimental with the typography, and other people just doing that thing you do with letterpress, which is take all the fonts and all the cuts and make something kind of whimsical. So this was an early collaborative project, and one that's really kind of fun. But then as I started settling in, one of the first things I started to do is just say, okay, we want to get everybody getting a chance to play with setting type. And that's a real challenge in the studio when you have a class of 15 students and you sort of let them loose and say, okay, go ahead and just use the type that we have, figure out a thing you're going to do. What I realized early on was to really limit that and say, okay, we're going to work in just a small setting. So some of these early letterpress projects, we started to just say, okay, you're going to set type, it's going to fit on a single page. So this is maybe a 5x5 book. And everyone's going to print one. And so these are giving the students a theme of memory, and everyone's printing one little piece to go with it. Here, someone added a linoleum cut. That's pretty fancy. But the challenge here is this is a really diminutive book. It's like if everyone's just printing one little piece to sit on a facing page, we have most text is facing a blank page, and also the book itself, this is like white on white, so you can barely see it. Also, the book itself just ends up being kind of small. There's not a lot to it. So I was always trying to figure out ways to make the projects have a little bit more substance and bulk to them. So the collaborative book we made would have a bit more to it. So one of the early things I tried was to do more of a French fold book. So this one, if you look carefully at the way it's constructed, we still had two students printing on a single sheet, but this book, each signature, here's the sewing, and it's handily sewn with orange thread. Each signature is this folded piece of paper. So to demonstrate that, I had pulled out some newsprint for this purpose. Each signature would be a piece of paper folded once, and then folded twice. And then there would be printing here and here. on the whole sheet. And so it got a little more bulky, and it ended up getting trimmed on the open ends, but leaving this fold along the top. So this becomes the page module, is the signature. It's just this folded piece. And this is like related to old style bookbinding, where signatures would be folded up this way and then eventually cut apart once the book was bound by your bookbinder. But I do like this because it makes the book a little thicker, because you have a lot of extra paper built into it with those sort of French folded sections. We do a lot of bookbinding formats. One of the things that in the book arts classes that we do is we just bind books, a lot of empty blank books. But here's one of the formats we've used a lot. It's one of the early ones because it's so simple. It's called a cutaway soft cover. So you have a hole in the middle and you're just wrapping your thread around the top and the bottom. This made for a nice format for a book because we could actually, this is funny now that I look at it. How do we do that? These signatures are wrapped and sewed through on the inside and then glued after the book's been bound. So actually, I had forgotten about how we did this one. It was sewn onto these tabs inside and then glued together once the book was completed. But each person contributed a single signature in a different color paper. And these were 2-color prints, as you can see. We have, one of the things that we do, I like to say that I like to tell the students, oh yeah, when the former book arts instructor was a guy named Jim Koss, some of you may be familiar with his work. He actually has a really interesting philosophy where he would print one-offs. Like he would treat letterpress not like a medium that makes multiples, but as a medium that makes a single thing. So it's a really interesting philosophy. But he was a book arts teacher here at Cornish before me, and I never had a chance to interact with him. But I like to tell the students that as Jim was building the studio over the years, in the 80s and 90s, this equipment was like VCRs to us now. Nobody wanted it. It was free for the taking if you would just move it. And so we treat a lot of visual art making opportunities that way. We have a blueprint machine that lives over in the printmaking area, but is basically part of our equipment. And Cornish keeps trying to get rid of it. They're like, why does this place always smell like ammonia? And we keep saying, no, this is amazing. This is one of the coolest pieces of material or pieces of equipment. So we have blueprinting as one of our capabilities and use it a lot. It's actually a really nice format. So it's one of the ways that it works. One of the nice things about it is it's such large format. We can work at up to 36 by 24 is the biggest blueprint paper we have. It can actually, it's a huge machine. I think it can actually go much larger than that. But we've done a number of collaborative books with blueprinting, and let me show you, where's the one? Oh, here it is. Yeah. So the pages, what we ended up doing with this one is each student took a whole sheet, which was 18 by 24, and divided it into strips this long. So it's actually wide strips. This book, the stab binding, it pulls apart this way. So they're double the width of the actual book. And then we came up with a theme. And we're inspired with this book by this largest stories all told here in this very avant-garde way where you can't even read the text because it crosses the fold. Everyone sort of interacted with typography and imagery to build their own pages. And then again, this book got assembled in whatever order the students wanted to. So they could put their own work first, or they could make their work interact with other students. We didn't have a prescribed order for this to go together. But you can see, I mean, this gorgeous rich blue. It's such a really, I love this image making technique. It's so great. And it's so fast that we have, the students can run a run of 12 or 15 pages in under an hour, and they're big. This book was, as you can see on the hardware here, we went to the hardware store and got some stuff, and it was inspired by a book that I had bought, I think maybe off Kickstarter, this reproduction of De Pero Fortuna's bolt book. So it's got these huge, ridiculous bolts on it. And I brought this in and showed the students, they're like, ooh, let's do something like that. So it wasn't quite this aggressive. We took our hardware down a little bit, but it's still kind of cool. And it has these great pins, cotter pins to it. So that was one of the ways that we use some of the image making materials we have, the blueprint material, and turn that into a book. the advantage, one of the advantages here is because we're not printing double-sided, you can't print double-sided on the blueprint, or actually just print it on one side and then the fold becomes the foredge of the book where you turn the pages. So all this excess material is in, blank inside and gets bound here on the stab bound end. Oh, nice. All right, so we have one cover finished. There's that. Laura's got that coming together. And this will just, eventually the page will just glue right onto this cover, but you can see there's a nice wrapped board, some really beautiful corners, all set to go. Here's another one. This is a more traditional stab binding. It's just got hard boards and hinges to it, and it's been bound with thread. The theme, as you can see, is water. That's letter pressed on a little accent piece. And then again, that same material. This is a really nice way to get students to work. We all took the theme of water and created it. And I often work in tandem with the students. I think it's fun as the instructor to get to make these things too. So I don't remember which one was mine, but I also contributed to this. And then I can feel right now as I'm paging through this, this feels a little different. I'm guessing, oh, no, I guess I'm wrong. This must just be a different batch of blueprint paper. I was gonna say it felt like we put a sheet in between to bulk up this book too, but it's not. So this must have been a batch that was slightly, maybe it's 60 pound, not 50 pound blueprint paper. One thing I wanted to say, I don't know if Jenny is still on the line, but Jenny did a project a little while ago in collaboration with Jenny Wilkson at Partners in Print with the Volunteer Park Conservatory. That was, I saw it on Instagram and it was, she was like, I'm printing on laser cut blocks. And I was like, wait, what are you doing? That is so cool. And so we've been doing, we have laser cutting in our sculpture lab. And so we've been messing around with laser cutting quite a bit. And this is a project from a couple of years ago where we were just trying to figure out how can we integrate laser cutting into the image making and letterpress printing world. And so Jenny's was laser cut blocks, and I have one that maybe I'll show in a little bit that has that, but this was using the laser cutting as line making. So everyone made a block and then used the laser to draw lines, which basically removed the ink. This is the paper color showing through. The green is actually the ink that's inking over the whole block, and then the lines are coming from where the laser cut in a line and removed a tiny bit of material. One of the things I do a lot with, just like the Create a Kent project, is I have the students interact with a chunk of letterpress lettering or wood type. This is our biggest wood type we have in the studio. We call it Nelly Bold. We don't even have a full alphabet. It's maybe 3 to 4 inches tall. But everyone chose a letter and then interacted with that letter in a linear way to embellish it. So that's often what these collaborative projects end up being, is a way to interact with some visual material. And one thing we learned as we were going on this was it's actually, I thought it was going to be really simple to print. It was actually really difficult to print and get great print. So like we can zoom in. Some of these, they look pretty good when you get up close to them. This one is the best page, the one I was showing earlier. You really like see that pop and the embellishment of the lines. Some of them, they really recede into the background. You have to look a little more carefully. But it was a cool experimental way to make text interact with wood type. And then the format, again, here we go. We have a accordion book. It's got a little ribbon tie that wraps around. It's got some silk screening on the back in the split fountain, white to green, to make your eyes swim just a little bit. So a lot going on with this piece, with each student contributing a letter. And then I believe there's title page, and they figured out how to get the letter or the laser cutting to actually do the text on the back page. One of my favorite things that we ever did is this one. And so I'll talk about the process here. Again, we're working with with wood type and then interacting it with some image making. So everyone took a letter and turned it into an alphabet, or sorry, into an animal. So we have leopards and lions and rabbits. This type, I pulled a couple samples of it. It's a little smaller one. Early on in my time here at Cornish, I came and we had one wood type alphabet. And so it used to be, and this is funny that I can talk like an old person because I don't feel like I'm that old, but it used to be on eBay, you could get wood type for relatively cheap. Nowadays it's ridiculous, but I would end up using leftover lab fees at the end of every semester to buy wood type alphabets. So we have a pretty decent collection now. It still feels like not a ton, but we do have quite a bit of wood type for the students to play with, and it's a bit more indestructible than the lead type. It's a little more user-friendly for first timers on the letterpress. But the way we made this project, I was really excited about. This was in collaboration with our lab tech, Brad Taylor, is we cut vinyl, and let's see how well you can see this. So we have this block of wood here, and maybe I'll go to the big screen first. So we have a big block of MDF, so this gets up to type high. It's mounted with a couple pieces of like mat board, and to get everything relatively type high to go on our press. And then we cut vinyl. So like the kind of vinyl you'd use to do a restaurant window and put a logo on it, to build up, I believe it's 2 layers thick. So it's our thick vinyl. And so oops, I'm bumping my camera a little bit. The relief on those prints is just fine cut vinyl. And the reason why the whole book has this design of this kind of crisscross thing is I knew that we would get a ton of ink interference if we didn't have something for the rollers to ride on. So basically, pragmatically speaking, we designed these pieces for the rollers to just skim the rest of the detail. And that was the way it was all designed. And you can sort of see all the little notes that we have to set up where does everyone's thing go so that the animal can interact with the letter, where it's supposed to go. There's a lot of planning that happens with the students when they are trying to make one of these things come together. So looking at my watch, I can see we're getting pretty close to the end. Let's see if there's any more. I'll show one more that I really like, and then I'll open up to questions and see if you guys have any questions. But this one, TypeCon happened in Seattle back in like 2008 or something, and one of our former students did a poster and then donated a ton of this really sparkly blue paper. So this has made an appearance in a number of our projects because we have a stack of it still. But this is kind of cool, letterpressed in silver ink and then splashing solvent onto it to make the whole thing actually like very liquid. The word liquid has took forever to dry, but it looks really cool. And then this is probably one of the more innovative book formats that my students have ever done. This project was a bit more digital in nature. It was based on photography. And the way the signatures work, this drove our print tech crazy when we were trying to print it. Is each signature, if you look, has a little piece, and then the continuation of that on the other side is a long sheet. So this little flag of information that relates to the spread it's living in then connects to a full sheet on the other side. So then this piece here has a little tail that binds on the other side of the pamphlet. And so as each spread you come to is someone's work, and then you show I think the way this project worked is everyone took everyone else's photos and combined them into these collages. So here are the photos that happened in this spread, and then a little bit of text to go with it. So this one was a real bear to just like production wise to create, but a really interesting outcome, I think. And it's just a pamphlet stitch. It's a single signature sewn in the middle. You can see the thread there and put into a cover. So a kind of simple outcome in the end, but the planning of this one, it was great to try and get the students to figure out how to do this. It took a lot of mock-ups and dummies to get this one right. So those are a number of our projects that we've done as collaborative things for students. I wanted to open up, I see at least one question in the chat there. Do we have separate questions? Okay, so that's one of the biggest limitations of Cornish is we are just it's just available to our students. We don't open up the lab to to the community very often. Every once in a while we've done summer programs. We don't even let our grads back in. And it makes me a little bit crazy because I think it's a really good resource to have like lab monitors come in, but the whole school, it's only available to currently enrolled students. So what we like to say is we train up people, we get them super excited about letterpress and screen printing, and then we send them out into the world to find other studios to support, like Partners in Print or Pratt or other places around town that have resources available. And then this is a great question too. Do these books live? These books live in that cabinet, and they haven't been seen for so long. When I was thinking about what to show here, I was like, you know what? All those collaborative books would be really cool to pull out. Obviously, I use them as classroom examples, but they actually aren't archived. They're not really showcased. And one thing I'm realizing is that they would make a really nice show either internally here at Cornish or somewhere else, just to show collaborative work over the years. We always make an edition where there's enough that everyone gets to have a copy of what we're making. So that's part of the exercises. They print usually 20 copies. Generally classes are from 12 to 15. So everyone prints 20 copies. There's enough to leave at least 1 or 2 in the classroom. Everyone gets their own copy as well. And that's one of the huge advantages of a collaborative project, is then you also get examples of everyone else's work, where most often in school, you make your own thing, you keep your own thing. In a collaborative book project, everyone gets to share the work that they've made, sort of like a print exchange. What else? Anything else?
I was going to jump in with a question. I was curious what other kinds of projects you have for your students to kind of build up to the collaborative book that you produce. Like, how do you introduce them to printmaking, or do you just like throw them in the fire?
That's a great question. We do a lot of different things. Usually there will be a bit of an introduction. So like I said earlier, we do a lot of bookbinding. That's kind of the focus of the class. That's my expertise, and it's what I find the students really enjoy. I try to not do too many books where they end up with blank books. So we will incorporate content, either kind of randomly generated content or content that they can generate relatively quickly, like flowing a book or something like that. But things really bog down when you get into the technical aspects of letterpress or silkscreen. It takes a lot more work and preparation to do image making than it does to make books. And so I try and introduce that just a couple points in the semester, in ways that we will be able to work kind of quickly. There's not a lot of practice often. I mean, it's a great question, Tom, and it's sometimes like they've had a chance to do a quick typesetting exercise where I'll introduce the room and all the equipment, but then they're just diving in and doing their own project. And so these, as a first try, often they're like, this is okay. You've got some problems here and it's probably going to be falling over a little bit on press, and that's fine. We're not really training fine printers here. We're introducing the equipment and the concepts. And when they're interested, students like Laura is back in the lab all the time doing personal projects, making things happen. Yeah. Oh, and this is great. And so I don't know if here we have, and are these are
screen prints. Oh, they're from Alphabet.
This is from the Alphabet, yeah. So then here we have the tab module. Here's the flat version, and here it is ready to get put together into the accordion book, and then just a number of these would stack together, get glued with this tab to become the project, or become the pages in the book. That's awesome. Oh yeah, yeah. And here's a good example of like learning to print. So this one is the halftone, like a relatively fine halftone, and we have really great silkscreen support in our screen printing lab, but you still end up with stuff like this a lot of the time.
Well, you learn really good by messing up.
Yeah.
So this is like a picture that had like a really small screen, and so I had to understand how the ink works.
Yeah, learning about the process of making mistakes definitely teaches you how to solve for that the next time. I see there's a question in the chat about bookbinding classes or workshops. The places to keep in mind for that, Edition Studio is a great resource there down in Georgetown. Book Arts Guild occasionally runs bookbinding classes. A small plug for myself, I'll be teaching a workshop out at Kurtwood Farms on Vashon Island this summer. So if you want to do something really dreamy and go out to a farm and learn how to make a book, you could sign up for that one. The resources for bookbinding in Seattle come and go. Watch Pratt Fine Arts Center too. They have bookbinding classes that sometimes show up on their roster, sort of live in their letterpress and print arts area. But the enthusiasm, I was on the board of a group called Seattle Center for Book Arts for 5 or 6 years, and we were trying really hard to do kind of entry-level bookbinding and book arts type work, but that was, it ran its course, and that was in the early 2000s. So I think that just keep your eye out for things and ask around, and there are always opportunities that are coming up, just not always in the same place. That's a great question. I think that go follow Kurtwood Farms or Kurt Timmermeister on Instagram, or watch the website. I believe the classes are being released June 1st. That's what I've heard. So coming up very soon. This is great. Kurt will be happy if I sell an enrollment right away. There you go. Any other questions? Cool.
I think if not, then thank you so much for your time and sharing your studio today and some of the projects your students have put together over the years. It's inspiring to see. Susan, do you have a question? I see you given the okay.
No, it's just fantastic, all the projects you showed. It's really inspiring to see the work you do with the students that come through. They must be pleased as well too to be so included in a group project, because they're always so hard to do. So kudos to you as an instructor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great to see all that. Good.
Yeah, it's fun. John and I had taught together a number of years ago, so it's fun to see your face here. Thanks for being here, John.
So coming up next at 2 o'clock is a workshop with Anemone. They're going to do a risograph printing zine workshop. So if you sign up for that, you should have a link in your email. And then after that at 4 o'clock, Jamie and I are just going to do a casual kind of office hours with Knox Gardner from Seattle's Entre Rios Books. And that'll wrap up Makeready. So thank you for hosting the last studio visit of the entire fair. It's a good wrap up for it. And thanks also to everyone for sticking with it on this sunny Saturday afternoon on a holiday weekend.
Oh, nice.
One more.
Here we go. Laura's coming in right at the end with a couple panels connected together, which is great.
Oh, wow.
Hey.
So great. Thank you. That's so cool.
Perfect time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.